Three. Hey everyone, this is Gary Collins of the Old Dudes New Tricks podcast, and we have a guest here. Dwayne is not here tonight, so I'm doing this solo because I didn't want to have to reschedule and do this because I know, John, your time's pretty short and your schedule's pretty tight. But if you would, and I always butcher your last name, so I want to make sure I get it right. Pugliano? Did I get it right?
That's good. I pronounce it Pugliano, but
Okay.
many variations. It's an Italian name. It should be John Pugliano. But I don't say it that way. So.
Well, and we're doing it. John's using his phone. We had a guest before use their phone for this. We had some technical difficulties. So hopefully this will come out okay. It gets a little iffy with phones. I might have some audio issues here and there, but bear with us. I guarantee you'll like this interview. But John, tell me a little bit about yourself. Me and John have known each other a couple of years. He's in the survivalist community. We're both friends with Jack Spurko. So that's kind of how we know each other. But just kind of give us the short of where you came from and where you are.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, I'll start with where I'm at. I'm a money manager of a private firm. I own my own investment firm, and I manage client retirement money, mostly about $20 million. It's a small company that I put together in the past few years, and it was something that I always wanted to do. And it just took me till I was in my 50s to be able to do it. And, one of those, I'm kind of like, I'm a 25-year overnight success, I guess is the way they say it. I'm an old dude that does new tricks.
That's right.
But so where I came from, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, raised in the suburbs, but pretty much from a blue-collar background. Joined the Marine Corps when I was 17, spent about 7 years active duty in the military, some time in the reserves, picked up a couple degrees along the way, spent 20 years in corporate America working in sales and marketing, industrial products. But my passion was always investing in stocks. And over the years, that's where I gravitated to and was eventually able enough to build up my portfolio to where it was large enough where I could go out on my own and do this professionally for a living, without any affiliations to anybody else. So that's kind of where I'm at now. And it's a great life. I tell people I'm retired, but I work every day and I work harder than I ever did before.
Well, it's very interesting. We don't do this on purpose, but you're probably, gosh, we have a ton of veterans. I mean, literally almost every guest we've had has been a veteran, and we don't do it on purpose. It just kind of works that way. So it's very interesting. But I love that you say that you're a 25-year overnight success, because we talk about entrepreneurship quite a bit on the show. And there's a misconception. I get it from a lot of my friends that, boom, you just start your own business, you're making millions, it's all overnight, and no one kind of sees all the hard work and dedication. And you spent decades basically honing your skill, learning it on the side until you could do it full time. And that's not too different from my story. I spent 20 years in the government, and then I transitioned and I created my own company doing the things I do now, but it's primarily evolved from primal lifestyle to now I call it, life simplification is what I'm trying to call it, because that's basically what I'm teaching when I started looking at it as a whole with my Off the Grid project. But reason we're here too is John just released a new book, and I want to show it here. The Robots Are Coming. Full disclosure, I'm only halfway through it. I just got it, and I was explaining to John, I can't do ebooks, so I had to wait and get it in the mail and make sure I had it. But so far, it's fantastic. I mean, everything in there is, I'm almost positive we've either talked about it on the show with guests or over several shows. But basically, if you could tell people what the book is about and why you wrote it, I guess would be the two main questions.
Yeah, and it's it's as you mentioned, it's called the Robots Are Coming, and it's not a gloom and doom book that the robots are going to come and take everybody's job, but it's also not a happy story that automation is going to make everything utopian wonderful. I designed it as the subtitle was that it's a survival manual, and I made it that way because I knew there'd be a lot of people particularly people that are my age and your age, Gary, people in their 40s and 50s that are going to be displaced by automation. I've seen this happen over my lifetime. I saw it happen. One of the reasons I joined the Marine Corps in 1979 was because all the steel mills and the mines and the things were closing up in Pennsylvania. Jobs were leaving Western Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt part of the U.S., and they were going to Japan back in those days. Japan was the China of today. And everybody's like, oh, China's going to take over. Well, when I was a kid, it was Japan was going to take over. And I saw people that were 40, 50, 60 years old that were forced into either early retirement or no retirement because their jobs were displaced. And so I think that same thing is going to be happening with automation, but it's not going to be a regional phenomena like it was back then. In fact, it's going to be a global phenomena. It's going to hit all countries. And I wanted to design this book so someone could read now and prepare, because I don't know if it's going to happen next year, 10 years, 15 years, but it is coming. And to one extent or another, everybody's life is going to be affected. And I wanted people to have a plan. A lot of that plan has to do with what you've already mentioned, like entrepreneurship, things like that I wasn't aware of that were in me years ago. In fact, when you're talking about, it took me 25 years to be an overnight success. One reason was it took me a lot of years to know that I was an entrepreneur. I never knew. I didn't know that, I thought I just hated bureaucracy. I didn't realize that I wanted to put together a company and run it myself. So a lot of that book is telling people, hey, maybe you're an entrepreneur. Maybe you should be doing this, or, watch out for these kind of things. This is what's going to happen. I also have a lot of investment guidance and advice in there, because I think that there's going to be great opportunities to invest, but at the same time, a lot of traditional companies are going to get hurt by this. And so many things that worked in the past won't work in the future.
Well, and I love that you bring up that robots aren't here to replace us. They're here to work within a structure of repetitive tasks primarily. And let's be honest, I've done it. Anyone who's had a job, punching something, or, it's over and over and over, it is mind-numbing. It is a mind-numbing job, the repetitive jobs, like putting lug nuts on a automobile in the assembly line. That used to all be hand, and now they have these, robots that'll drop down, finds it, and they'll torque it for them. And it's interesting, the timeliness of this interview, because Dwayne can't be here. He is a manager at an auto place. I don't think I'm supposed to say exactly what his job is, but he works with robots, and the robots have gone afoul. So he's there trying to straighten it out, and he had to work. And you talk about that you have to understand that there's certain jobs that are just going to go away. And I love how you go into history and show it's been going on since since we became an industrial nation. Basically, jobs have been replaced by automation in some form or another, and it's going to continue to happen. And instead about worrying about it, you just get prepared. And the thing we have here, and you talk about a multitude of different jobs. I tell people, because we've discussed automation on this show, that if you want to guarantee that you'll have a job, think of the things that are never going to go away that a robot can't do. A robot can't put plumbing in a house. They can't do electrical. They can't hang drywall. They can't tape and texture, and they never will. I mean, when you look at that sort of thing, and I'll be honest, the trades today pay far more than when me and you entered the workforce. For me, 30 plus years ago, I look at what kids can make today right out of the gate in these trades. It is incredible, and people can't find apprentice. Everyone here who comes up and does work on my property as contractors, they literally complain, and I have to schedule them way out because they're so booked. No one will work. No one wants $20 an hour. As an 18-year-old, they're all, nah, forget it. And I'm all, my God, $20 an hour when I was 18? I would think I was rich. And not only that, but that's the start. If you get going, these guys are making $90 an hour. That to me is incredible. And it blows my mind that I hear so much complaining that I can't, my job's taken away by automation, and there's nothing I can do about it. There's plenty of jobs.
Yeah, and one of the points I try and make in the book is that with automation, it's those repetitive tasks, and those repetitive tasks are going to be replaced at all levels. And my argument really is too that it's going to be replaced at the higher levels because most of the lower levels have already been replaced.
Yeah.
On the assembly line, you mentioned the lug nuts. Well, they've already had robotic welders and painters for probably 30 years now. So those jobs are gone anyways. What's coming next is going to be for the mid-level managers, doctors, attorneys, things like that, because I regard robots as not only just physical, mechanical, robotic arms, but automation of all sorts.
Mm-hmm.
The intelligent software that would scan and look through case studies that a first-year law student would have done. That's all being done by artificial intelligence now. And so, jobs for attorneys to do the research work, things like that, you don't need anymore. Some translators, editors, all those kind of things are being done by artificial intelligence. It's going to keep getting more and more encroaching. And the good news, like you mentioned about with the trades, I think the good news is that as long as it's not a repetitive job, so the more random service kind of oriented it is, I think the better it will be. But also, even within that, the jobs that are being replaced were not jobs that were meant to be done by humans to begin with, right? I mean, humans were not designed to do repetitive tasks.
No.
That's why we have we have back problems, we have carpal tunnel syndrome, because we were never designed to do those jobs. My grandfather was a coal miner. That's not a job that a human body was designed to do. That's why they all got black lung and died when they were 50 years old.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the good news is the robots are going to take over those jobs as well, which is good for us, and it'll free us up as humanity to do the things that we were designed to do, which I think is more, creative, more, the whole interpersonal. I call it human touch in the book, and it's, not necessarily to go off on a spiritual kind of tangent or something, or as Eastern kind of Zen kind of thing, but humans are the way we are for a particular reason, right? I mean, that's the way we are, and when we do those things, we're happier, we're more productive, we do them better. For a lot of years, I was miserable, and maybe wasn't miserable. I was just unhappy in what I did because I had to make a living, I had a family to support, and literally now I can work for 18 or more hours and not even think about taking a break. I forget to eat, or whatever it is, because I'm just so absorbed with what I love to do. And I never worked that hard. When I was working for the man, I never worked that hard.
That's good.
That's the good news. And that's the good news about robotics. And it's going to enable us to do these things that I think we were meant to do. Again, that's what the book is there to help people with, to kind of drill down and think about who they are, what they like, what they want to do, how they can create products and services to help other people. Because, people envision these dystopian worlds where the robots are going to take over. And again, while I do think there could be a lot of mass unemployment, you have to remember that we live in a market system. And so if no one is employed, if no one has any money, then there's also not going to be any robots, because there won't be anybody to finance the robots to create them. So, I mean, it's going to be one of these things that's going to go in fits and starts, and it's not going to all happen over at night, but it will be hitting people that I think are not expecting it. Listen, one of the examples I give in the book, and you may not be into it yet, you said you're about halfway through the book. I tried to think of, as I wrote this book, I tried to think of different people that I knew that were being affected. And a lot of my clients are in the medical profession. So, I talked to a lot of them, and I got feedback. And obviously they're very, very high paid, and a lot of what they do is very repetitive. So, many of the examples in the book come from that. But one of the highest paid professions that I know of, and I have to say this nicely, one of the highest paid professions that I know of where they don't work real hard. Okay, let's just say they don't break a sweat, and that's orthodontists. These guys are making a killing,
Yep.
and they don't work. They employ about a whole office full of ladies that work really hard, but the dentist, orthodontists themselves, they don't put in a whole lot of hard hours.
Yep.
So that was one of the fields I just looked at. I did a little mind experiment. I said, well, could that be replaced with some kind of automation or artificial intelligence? And I just kind of thought through the steps of how do you straighten teeth? And I just came up with this idea, hey, you could 3D print a retainer. You could map your teeth and see where your bite is, where your overbite is, know what the perfect one should be, and then create a model that transitions there and have a 3D printer just print out 5 or 10 or 25 retainers, whatever it would be, to take you to those steps. And then you could wear that every night. When that one was done, put in the next one. And I said, it's a crazy idea, but you think about that, it could probably be done. And then after I did that, I went online and I researched it. And I found out there's some kid at MIT or somewhere that did exactly that. So he's already done it. And there's a reference in the book as where you can go read about it. But so basically, someone came up with that idea. They said, hey, I'm gonna map out where my overbite is, and he used off the shelf existing stuff. Now this guy's an engineer at MIT or somewhere, Stanford, so he's smarter than me. But he didn't. The key point of this automation and robots is that it's going to enable dumb guys like me, right? Once that guy figures it out, all I need to do then is get my overbite scanned and use his software to print out my retainers.
Yeah.
I don't have to know all the stuff he knew to write the code. And, if you could enable a process like that, I think again, it's referenced in the book, but I think he had maybe like $30 in materials is what it cost him to do this. And you think if you go to a dentist, you're going to him for like many years, and it costs, I don't know, $4, $5, $10,000. Just again, one example of how something that seems really far out is going to be done fairly simply at home. And I think things like, whether it be 3D printing or other types of CNC type manufacturing, are going to really revolutionize and change the way things are done. It's going to take a lot of jobs away from more repetitive manufacturing, which probably won't hurt the United States as much as it hurts, Korea, Vietnam, China, places like that. But it's going to put, because people are still going to want things, but it's going to put the power within local manufacturing to make up exactly what we want. And so, I don't know if I'd someday have my own 3D printer that just prints out my stuff, because, again, 3D printers have really been hyped over the years. But you look at what can be done with a CNC type mill, or just, all these computer aided type manufacturing processes. If every community had multiple of those type equipment, I can see the day where we could have self-sufficient communities again, where instead of going and ordering something off of Amazon, I just, download the designs and I send it over to Fred, and Fred's got the guy that, he makes that stuff. And, George has another type machinery that he makes those kind of things. And it kind of gets back to the trades you talked about. The creativity is what's going to be needed. The guys that, if Leonardo da Vinci had a 3D printer, he would be able to use it much more effectively than you or I.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And so, so that's the way it's going to be. These machines, these robots are going to enable us to make better products and services.
Well, and not only that, as you explain in the book, and I've talked about this, and obviously Dwayne is, the more robots you have, someone still has to program them, someone still has to maintain them. It's not like they can just go on their own. There's still people that have to work within that, and those are pretty high-tech fields as well, and not too bad paying. And if you look at it that way, we got into the argument of, and someone wasn't too happy about it, but I explained the $15 an hour rule, minimum wage, how it doesn't help those people get to where they need to get to anyway, because what they want is they want a living wage for a menial task. And the job market was never set up to do that. Working at McDonald's or, Starbucks was never meant to give you, as just a straight minimum wage, give you a good, healthy middle class living. It was never designed for that. Those are jobs where you learn a skill, and then you that's where you break in. It's usually for either part-timers, college students, high schoolers, maybe a husband or wife who wants a part-time job, something along those lines. And I did the math. If two people make $15 an hour, basically deep frying fries, which is pretty much automatic today, they make over $60,000 combined for a household income. It was I think it's 64 something. I can't remember my math, but it's over $60,000. And I went, that is going to have massive repercussions on the cost of those goods. Well, as you gave an example too, it is much cheaper now to replace you with automation in that industry. So now you're not even going to make minimum wage. You're just not going to have a job. Because I think the job market, people are trying to force the job
Yes.
market and the lower menial tasks. They're trying to force these into living wages. It can't work that way. We cannot, there's not enough money and enough of us to be able to pay for this and to pay for those goods at higher. It just creates inflation is all it does. I mean, just everything becomes ridiculously expensive. And then we're back to square one because now they're $15 an hour, gets downgraded because now everything's that much more expensive. So now they're right back where they started. So yeah, it's very interesting.
And I think you and I probably think very similar in terms of the many of the government programs are a Ponzi scheme. Something like Social Security. It sounds good. It works well when your society has a few old people and lots of young people. But now we're in a different situation where we have more people retiring than we have working. But society's always looking for the easy way out. Politicians always want to get reelected, so they're going to come up with an easy answer, an easy solution. And I think there's going to be, and I talk about this in the book, as you get further into it, you'll probably see where I talk about it. I think there's really going to be a tug of war between inflationary pressures where the government does have to step in and provide maybe a guaranteed minimum income or universal basic income. And that's going to create the inflationary pressures as they have to debase the currency to support all that. But on the other hand, technology and automation will be very deflationary.
Yeah.
Because the robots don't have a minimum wage. They don't have a union. They don't take vacations. They don't need sick days. They're going to be we're going to be able to make things much more productively. So I think there's going to be, and you think about electronics, the most expensive computer system I ever owned was the first one I bought back in like 1987. Since then, they've always gotten better and cheaper, and that's just the way of technology. And so I think that's going to continue into the future. Things will become cheaper, but our currency will be more debased and inflated as we have to provide more people with a safety net. And so I don't know how they're going to net out if they'll be in balance or how that'll ultimately work. And that kind of gets later on, we can talk about too, that gets in that investment part. Some of the things that we traditionally thought are good investments may not be investments in the future, depending upon whether we do or don't have inflation. But as far as the actual individual, you talked about the $15 an hour thing. It's obviously going to price out younger people. On the high end of things, if you're a big manager at a Fortune 500 company, they're going to have automation that they don't need you either. We've already built in all this enterprise software, Oracle, SAP, all these things that does all those accounting and measuring and all the monitoring that historically you needed smart people with MBAs to do. All that bean counting and stuff, that can all be done with automation now. So you're not going to need the $15. You're not going to need the $250,000 guys either. And that's where it's going to come down to. What do we need? Those creative things that people can do are going to be the careers that people are going to have to find. One of the points I want to make, though, is it's not only going to be about just pricing people out of the market, but I think there's going to be certain traits that we're going to be able to eliminate people. Like people say, well, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to pay employees to do something? I'm like, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to deal with rude, mean people? If if you didn't have to go down to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get your driver's license and have some mean person make you wait in line and tell you you have the wrong forms and all this kind of stuff. What if you could just bypass those people altogether? Like things like cryptocurrency. What if we don't need the Federal Reserve anymore, right? What if we don't need these mean bureaucrats because we have automation and other systems to go around them? And so I think that's going to be a real trade too, is nice people are going to want to interact with each other, and it's going to keep you away. It's going to make it really hard on the mean people.
Well, unfortunately, though, the bureaucrats have figured out to keep themselves around until the last day of time, I think. They're the kings and queens of getting absolutely nothing done, is what I've noticed. Republicans and Democrats, the bickering that's going on now is just unbelievable. I mean, they literally don't get anything done. I mean, how hard, this is the part recently that really pissed me off, is how many times did the Republicans or the House, did they vote to either defund or abolish Obamacare? But it could never get, and they knew it would never get through the Senate. They knew they couldn't get it through. I think it was like 7 or 8 times. It was a ridiculous amount of times. They kept voting on it, changing it. And here we are. And now they have everything they need to repeal and replace Obamacare. They don't have a plan. These idiots never had a plan. They've been complaining about it for years. And now they have their chance. They're all, yeah, we don't know. We don't have a plan to fix it. And it's like,
that's because every Republican expected Hillary Clinton to be president for the next 8 years. they thought they could just keep on complaining and not have to have a solution. And so that gets back to the automation and the robotic side of things too. Look, I do think we're going to have this guaranteed minimum income of some sorts because it's easy. Mm-hmm. I don't think we'd need it. I really do think that the automation will create enough opportunities eventually to help the people that are displaced, but it takes time and effort, and people are lazy, and politicians are going to promise people, hey, okay, you've been replaced by robots. That's okay. We'll just give you $50,000 a year anyways, or we'll just give you food stamps. Vote for us. And that's the same problem we have with whether it's Obamacare or Medicare, Medicaid, all these. I mean, I know you work with FDA and all that stuff, so you know how convoluted all that is. Think about it, though. There is off-the-shelf technology that, for the most part, makes most of Obamacare obsolete if they let us use it.
Yeah.
We don't need to go to the emergency room or to the doctors for probably 90% of the stuff that people go to it. Your smartphone is smart enough to tell you whether you have strep throat, whether you're having a heart attack, whether you have cataracts. I mean, all these, your smartphone, they're between the smartphone and apps and adapters that can easily be plugged into a smartphone, which again are off the shelf. They're there now. FDA needs to approve them, and we have to go through all this convoluted processes. But that stuff is there, and we wouldn't need to spend the trillions on healthcare that we do if we just use technology. But again, that would hurt the American Medical Association and hurt the insurance companies and hurt the bureaucrats. And so, it may be decades before we get all that stuff. But, again, it gets back to individuals and how well we can bypass the system and use the technology. The job I do now, as far as being a money manager, I'm licensed by the state. I run a legal business. So, I did everything within the confines of what I had to do to set it up. But just from a technological standpoint, I couldn't do what I do, say, 10 years ago. There just wasn't enough software. I could trade the stocks and I could do those things, but to be able to run the office as a one-man show without, just the amount of paperwork that I have to store for my records, right? I have to keep everything for at least 5 years, all this filing and processing. Well, the reason I can do that today is because none of it's paperwork, right? It's all digital. And there wasn't enough of the software and the things that would allow me to do just that part of my job, say 10 years ago. And so, again, people, like you with your work and living off grid and things, that was really not something you really would have thought of 10 years ago. We all wanted to do it, but we're like, how can we get off grid? It's too expensive. there aren't solar panels. There's, and even if you are off grid, well, I don't want to be Grizzly Adams, right?
Yeah.
I like Home Depot and Costco and Walmart,
Well,
but
there was no way to
but now
work.
Amazon,
You couldn't work
but now
remotely.
Amazon,
Yeah.
you couldn't work remotely that way. But now
Yeah.
with the internet, I mean, I can literally work anywhere I have an internet connection, and
Yeah,
it
me
doesn't
too.
have to be super fast, but I do need an internet connection. But all the comforts of home are there, right? I mean, and between Amazon or whatever online service I want to use, I can have everything I need for the most part in 2 days. And so that's all automation, right? That was not, that's all how technology has helped us. And I think it's going to keep getting better.
And I agree. I couldn't do what I do now without the technology that's available today. I run my business 100% remote. Obviously, I ship product. I have a place that ships and does all that stuff for me. But otherwise, I mean, even the indie publishing world, I still publish independently. That technology has come around over the last 5 years to where now authors can literally do the entire publishing and marketing of their book all on their own. This is very new. I mean, without those advancements, you could not do that. You had to rely on a traditional publishing company, which anyone who's tried to deal with them or get a deal knows it is very, very difficult. So now you're in charge. You can control your content. You can control how it's delivered, where it's delivered. It's amazing what you can do today. And anyone who is an indie author knows too, it's boomed. The indie author world is massive now, and it's growing all the time. I think there's, I want to say, over 3.5 million authors on KDP Select on Amazon alone right now, or books. I can't remember. There's a lot, and that's kind of the amazing part
Yeah.
too. But there's an option for people too. Now you can become a writer if you want to. I mean, you can write. Anyone can write a book today. 10 years ago, you
Yep.
couldn't.
And the, like you say, the formats too. It can be an audio book. It can be a digital download. It can be a traditional. It's easier to do a traditional hard copy book now than it ever was, and you can knock them off one at a time. You don't have to print 10,000 or 1,000 copies or
Yeah.
anything like that. This gets back to the part about jobs, and I can't remember even how. I've done so many things with automation. I don't remember if this particular story is in the book or not because of what's made through the editing process and what didn't. But one of the things I did in my corporate career was I worked with printers. So I worked with Quebecor and R.R. Donnelley, and I mean there used to be these huge printing companies in the Midwest, and those guys are all pretty much bankrupt now. They're gone.
Yep.
But it was not that long ago that something as mundane as a telephone book that was an industry in and of itself. There were, special trees that were grown to make that type of paper that went into telephone books. And then there was obviously all the converting to make the paper. And then the paper had to be printed. And then there were specialty inks and specialty equipment. And then there were salesmen that sold ads in, it was literally in and of itself a multi-billion-dollar business. Today it doesn't exist. Just something as simple as a phone book, telephone. I know you're younger than me, but you're old enough to remember telephone booths.
Oh yeah.
When I was a traveling salesman in the early days of the 90s, I knew every good telephone that you could drive your car up to and talk to. You didn't have to get out of your car. There weren't cell phones in it. There were cell phones. Coverage was bad. They were really expensive. And the best option for traveling salesmen was still a telephone booth. Airports were full of them. And again, that was a multi-billion-dollar industry. People had to repair them. People had to install them. People had to go collect the quarters out of them. All those things are just gone. And that type of creative destruction is going to happen faster than anybody can imagine as we go forward.
That's a good point. Heck, just when I was in the State Department, I remember us running around to airports using payphones. And that wasn't all that long ago, because even if you had it, Yeah, well, even if you had a cell phone, you wouldn't have a worldwide cell phone. You had to have a sat phone in order to
Right.
use worldwide. And that was ridiculously expensive. I can't remember how much a minute it was. We had sat phones overseas, but they were mission oriented. I didn't get one to hang around the airport and change my travel itinerary with. So yeah, and that was not, you're right, that was not that long ago. And technology it is going at lightning speed right now. It is going so fast that you have to be adaptive. Even in my business, when I started shipping product, my main thing was I had to compete with Amazon. And people go, "What do you mean compete with that? You're just a small time entrepreneur." I go, "If I can, I won't sell product hardly if I can't compete with Amazon. Though I have to figure out a system to where I can ship within 2 to 3 days. They get the product, and I have to basically today I ship basically almost the same day. If your order comes in, it goes out that day usually. Most of the time, it will go out that day, and I have to do that in order to stay competitive. If I didn't do that, I don't know if I'd even have a business. But what allows me to do that is technology. The technology and the advancements of logistical shipping now, that things can get there quickly, and it doesn't bust the bank. It is affordable for an entrepreneur to use priority mail. I use primarily priority because FedEx and UPS, it's very difficult to manage all of them on your own as a small-time entrepreneur. It's mind-boggling. So it's interesting how I look at that too. But I'm always advancing. I don't know about you. I'm always trying to learn new things because it's changing so quickly that I have to keep up or I'm a dinosaur. Within 6 months, I could be out of business if I don't pay attention.
Yep. And that's why the second part of the book is called, the book is broken down into 4 sections, and I have each one kind of entitled about thinking a certain way. So the second part of the book is about entrepreneurship, and it asks you to think like an entrepreneur, not like an employee. Okay, and it gets to exactly what you're talking about now about the barriers to entry. Again, if I thought that the robots were going to come and take all of our jobs, we would be screwed. It would be miserable. But the fact of the matter is that this automation is enabling us in so many ways that anybody that just has a little bit of creativity and some self-motivation can go out and they can create their own corporations and they can compete head to head with the big guys. Because, in the old days, the big guys, you couldn't compete with AT&T, right? If you wanted to start your own communications company years ago, you couldn't go out and compete with Ford or some big company because they had big protective moats around their business, and it was very capital intensive. You just couldn't afford any of that stuff. Nowadays, again, these barriers to entry have come down to where, if you can't source the equipment yourself through, what a CNC milling or 3D printing or something, you can have it outsourced to somebody that does own that equipment. And I get things just from a hobby standpoint. I'm a ham radio operator, so I like to build circuits and do things with ham radio. I can buy components from China, and within a week or two, they show up. They cost a few bucks, but I could have never done that years ago. I mean, it's just somebody has a factory somewhere else. They're willing to sell it to me. And, in that example, I use China, but there's stuff all over the place. Now, I'm looking more and more to source things from the U.S., more custom things. For Father's Day, I bought myself a gun. I always joke around with my kids. I always buy myself something really nice for Father's Day and tell my kids, thanks. That was the best Father's Day gift you ever got. But I bought myself a gun for Father's Day recently, and I'm looking around for a holster. And there are just a million options because there's so many guys out there that are custom making these things, out of the garage or whatever. They may have a factory, they may just be doing it out of the garage, but you can get exactly what you want now.
Yeah,
and
and
in the old
many
days,
options.
in the old days, yeah, you didn't have any options. You had to get with whatever was there, what was in the Sears and Roebuck catalog or something, right? Nowadays, it's just there, and people are able to make a living fulfilling these needs and these niches. And it's a great time to be alive.
Well, yeah, the creativity, like you said, anyone could start their own business today, and the price of entry is minimal. I mean, you can get in and start something for a fairly low amount of money. And not only that, but it's one of those to where you have the opportunity to get it out there. The downside is you have to usually do it via online, and there's millions and millions of entrepreneurs online. So you have to have a plan, and it takes time. A lot of people think, well, if I put it out there, all I got to do is get a website up and everyone's going to find it and buy my stuff. And it's like, nope. I've learned that hard lesson. You know, I've been focusing more on marketing this year and learning marketing on top of the other 5 million things that I've had to learn as an entrepreneur. And but that changes too, because now you can, with all the technology and the courses and being able to see it, you can be your own marketer too. In days past, these huge marketing firms were there for a reason, is because no one did their own marketing. You relied on marketing firms, the yellow pages, like you were talking about, the phone book, and advertisements, and it was traditional advertising. Well, those days now you could do ads on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter. You know, there's so many avenues today. It's easier and harder, I guess, is the best way I can put it. It's easier to get in, but I think it takes a little more will to get noticed, because there's so many people doing these things. As before, 10 years ago, how many people were online? 10 years ago, was there even a podcast? I don't think so. Was there? Can't remember. I
Yeah,
don't think.
they were just they were. It's about a decade now. They were just starting. Yeah, I think they came out 2006 probably.
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
When they were yeah, because the iPhone came out just 10. You were just coming up on 10-year anniversary of the iPhone, and I know I was listening to a podcast back when they had the what was it called? I don't remember now. It was before the iPhone, the iPod.
Oh yeah, yeah,
the iPod.
yeah,
Yeah, the iPod. I think I got my first iPod around, I think, 2005 or something. So yeah, these things are just remarkably changing, and again, it is very competitive. But the good news is, again, we've cut out the middleman. You don't need the marketing companies if you can know how to do it yourself, and that makes the cost of doing things so much cheaper. Just, again, kind of getting back to that yellow page thing, I literally remember working with small businesses, 20 years ago, and people had to. I mean, they ran their marketing campaigns around the new edition of the yellow pages coming out.
yeah.
If you were going to start your plumbing business, you didn't start it in March or something, because you wouldn't be in the phone book till, they didn't make a new phone book until June. And so if you started your business for 3 months, no one would be able to find you. And so you literally had to start your business around when they were publishing these things. And so there were time constraints, and you had to do direct mail, and that was very expensive. And yet I remember my first real job coming out of the military. My resume was typeset. I mean, it was literally, I couldn't just knock it off on a computer and print it. I had it typeset, and I had to make sure it was all accurate and right. And I just couldn't change anything, because once it was done, I had to have 200 copies printed from a printer. And that sounds like the dinosaur days now, but it wasn't that long ago that's the way things were. I talk about in the book too, under the entrepreneurial section, about there's different ways to do this too, in terms of, if you want to make $200,000, you can either have 100 clients that pay you $2,000, or you can have 2,000 clients that pay you $100. You're still going to come up with the $200,000, and it's going to depend on what your business model is, what kind of business you have, what your network consists of. In my job, because of the way I wanted to set it up and the level of service I wanted to do, and then the experience I had to do it with, I'm in that 100 client kind of category. I don't, people often ask me, well, how can you do such and such? Well, I can do it because I don't need 1,000 clients. I can make a really nice living off of 50 clients, because for one thing, I don't lose them. So I'm not constantly marketing, because I don't lose my old clients. And if you have one client, you get second client, you just doubled your business, right? I mean, it's that exponential growth. So if you're in a high price tag business, you can operate a very profitable business with 50 to 100 clients. I think a lot of doctors are going to go that way. I think doctors are going to
Yeah.
get fed up
Oh, it's
with
definitely
this
going that way.
Obamacare and government funding and insurance. And they're going to, and again, I'm talking to doctors that are in that situation. The only reason they're not doing it faster now is because of regulation. But there are doctors that can earn a really nice living with, that maybe they'll have, instead of seeing 100 clients a day, they may only have 300 clients total that they're responsible for all year. And it can be affordable if it's used, technology occurs to make things work. But you don't have to be a doctor to make that happen. You're in your businesses, the printing, the consulting, the health, nutrition and things. That's something that maybe you can't make a living off of 100 people, but you can probably do it off of 1,000, or 1,000 or a few thousand. And with the resources we have today, it's more than easy to reach those people for next to nothing. Technology has made information and data free. The next step of this is the automation is going to make labor near free. And for those of us that can figure out how to assemble the parts and put them together, you can make a really nice living. And, again, to the people that are listening that maybe they don't have a professional degree or they don't want one or they're too old to go back and get one or whatever, there are still a lot of opportunities. In the book, I contrast a doctor with like a handyman. And these aren't things I just made up in my head. I mean, I know people that do these things. I know people that make a nice living and they wash windows, right? Not even big skyscrapers, just residential window cleaners. They're people that want to work outside. They want to work outdoors. They're physically strong. They don't want a whole lot of employees to hassle them and stuff. And they just have these small little companies where they wash people's windows. Doesn't sound like you can make a living at it, but I know people that have an above average middle-class income washing windows. There are people that, and again, I think this is an example in the book, but I write and I talk about so many things. I can't remember if this is specifically in the book, but you can go to veterinary school to become a veterinarian. It takes you 6-8 years, whatever it is, costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars. You may or may not be able to get a job. Probably can't afford to set yourself up in practice, but you could do all that if you wanted to work with animals. I know people that it doesn't have the prestige of being a veterinarian, but they go out and they capture critters, right? They go out.
Yeah.
If someone gets a skunk, in their backyard, or a raccoon is messing in their trash, or they get a squirrel in the attic, or a bat, or bees come and get in their gutters or something. There are guys making above average middle class income that do that kind of stuff. You don't need a degree in most areas. You don't even need other than just have a business license. That's all you need. You don't need any special kind of certification or training. But the way you get these jobs and the way you find them is through technology. If you're marketing yourself, if you're out there knowledgeable and you're doing those kind of things, maybe you have a blog or whatever, people can find you now where they could have never found you before. You wouldn't have been able to afford to do the direct mail and all this stuff years ago that you would have had to do to build up your 1,000 clients that you can do today. Today you go into one major huge subdivision outside of, San Diego or San Francisco or somewhere. You establish yourself as the guy that knows how to take care of raccoons, because everybody wants to live by nature, but no one wants nature, right? Oh no, the deer are eating my flowers or whatever, So, you go into one of these mega subdivisions, you establish yourself as the guy that humanely removes raccoons, and through social networking and the internet and things, you can get your name out there for free. Pretty soon you're knocking down $70,000, $100,000, catching squirrels and cats and stray animals.
Well, it's about being creative. I've known many people over the years who made a good living doing landscaping. Yep. Bottom line, did landscaping for decades and made a very good living doing it. Now, obviously, it depends where you're at. If you're in Southern California, a little difficult because there's a heck of a lot more lower level labor because of the illegal immigration and all that. But they still made it. I mean, these guys lived in there. They still were able to do it. But I don't want to give away too much of your book, John. We've talked about a lot that's in it. Where can people go and you also have a podcast. So let people know where they can go listen to your podcast and get your book.
Yes, as far as the book goes, I actually did do this through a traditional publisher. We can talk offline why I went that particular route. But so it is published by Ulysses Press. It's available everywhere a book is. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Last time I checked, it's in about 25 different libraries. So even if you don't want to buy it, you see if it's in your library. If it's not, go tell your library to fill out a form at your library. They'll buy it, and you can get it that way. I do think it's good for people to have because I think it'll help them look at these entrepreneurial things. Again, the whole second half of it talks about investing and doing different things. Like, I can see scenarios where maybe traditional things like real estate, precious metals, maybe they're not as good of an investment the next 30 years like they were the past 30 years. Again, it gets back to that whole thing with inflation. Does that really happen? Is the cost of goods going down? And just real quickly to touch on that, for people that say, well, hey, the more they debase the currency, the more gold's going to be valuable. Maybe not, right? It was only 3 years ago that oil was $110 a barrel. Today, as we do this podcast, it's like $43 a barrel. That's because of technology.
Yep.
All the automation of horizontal drilling, fracking, all that stuff, big data, that has drastically brought down the price of oil. It's going to happen to everything. So people can get the book a lot of different places. As far as me, the best place to find me is at my podcast, wealthsteading.com. It's a takeoff of homesteading. It's wealthsteading. You can find that on iTunes, any normal place. Wealthsteading.com is the direct website that eventually could get to my business if they want to find out about what I do for a living. But the podcast, I talk about really my process about how I became financially independent, what I do in the stock market, how I'm cheap and I drive used cars or old cars or whatever, all those kind of just life things about me. The podcast is about how about a dumb guy like me can become financially independent. That's really the essence of the podcast.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point to leave on because I'm not a very bright guy either. So with that, I appreciate everyone listening, and thanks for being on, John, and congratulations on the book. Like I said, I'm really enjoying it. And everyone out there, make sure to subscribe to our channel, olddudesnewtricks.com. We're on iTunes and everywhere else. But again, thanks again, John, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate being on.